it's me, James, and I'd like to welcome you to this Oracle Outlook video reading, and it's going to cover the time period starting with Samhain, which is right around the corner. I'm shooting this video on Wednesday, October the 27th, and Samhain starts on October the 31st, which is also known as Halloween, but it's going to cover from Samhain until the end of the fall equinox, right before the winter solstice, and so there's a method to my madness. I actually intended on doing a video at the beginning of the fall equinox, but my life just got crazy and it just never happened. And so the theme here seems to be that I'm doing videos more seasonally now. If you remember, my last video reading was covering the summer solstice, right? So I'm figuring there's a theme there, so I'm going to stick with that. The deck that I'm going to be working with, sticking with the theme, is the Darkness of Light Tarot. It is by Tony DiMauro. And for me, the deck, while it has a lot of RWS, and that is tarot speak for Rider-Waite-Smith symbolism, or it follows that tradition, it has a distinct pagan flair to it, or at least that's how I see it. And so I figured that would be a perfect deck to use for this particular reading. Okay, so before I move into that, I also want to thank those of you who have spent time connecting with me, staying in touch with me, checking in on me, those kinds of things. And I also want to thank those of you who have been following the card pulls on my community tab. I post a daily card pull because it's easier for me to write out a card post rather than make a video all the time, with my time being what it is these days. So I want to thank those of you who have been regularly checking them out, leaving me likes, giving me hearts, all those wonderful little emojis, and those of you who have been commenting on them. So I just want to say thank you for that. I also want to thank those of you who have been tuning in to my evergreen content and offering me further suggestions on those. I had someone who sent me a request to do something on Spanish playing cards, so I may do that at some point. And also, too, somebody recently asked me about working with the Thoth tarot system. That is actually the very first tarot deck or tarot system that I worked with. So it has a special place in my heart. I don't work with either system that I've just talked about all that much these days. So if I do take those suggestions to heart, I want to do right by them, and I want to do them the justice that I feel they deserve. So I am considering those, and I'm not taking those suggestions lightly. So I just want to say thank you to those two viewers who made those suggestions. Okay, so now that I feel like I've said everything that I want to say at this point, let's shift gears and get to the table and take a closer look at what the Darkness of Light Tarot wants to share with us regarding the time period of Samhain to the end of the fall equinox. And here we are with the cards on the table, and I'm going to take a few moments to shuffle the deck. And as I do, I'm going to focus on the question I'm proposing or putting to the cards for this general reading. And that is, I'm asking, what do we need to know for the time period of Samhain until the end of the fall equinox? So I'm shuffling that into the cards. I'm feeling one more time, I'll be good. Alright. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut away, which is what I usually do when I'm doing readings that concern more than just myself. And now I'm going to fan the cards out. And I'm going through the fan, and I'm going to pick 5 cards, because I'm continuing to do one of my favorite readings, which is a line of 5. So I picked the first card, and I'm just continuing to look till my intuition tells me which card to pick. So I'm picking this as card 2. Card 3. Card 4. card 5 is all the way on the other end of the fan. So I have the 5 cards selected at the bottom of the screen. So now I'm going to take the remainder of the deck up. I'm going to move that to one side. Now I'm going to move these cards up. I'm going to spread them out in a line according to the order they were picked. All right. And I know it's been a while, but for those who were following my videos on a regular basis, when I work with a line of 5, I always refer to the middle card as the central issue or the focus. So we're going to look at that card first, and then we're going to look at the surrounding cards to see how they might inform us more about this particular card. So going with that, here we have the 5 of coins. Okay, so for me, the 5 of coins is a card that can talk about there may be people who are focusing or putting their energy or attention, or the central issue may have to do with financial matters. This is a card that talks about usually concern about money, concern about financial resources, things like that. So there may be some time and attention put into that. The 5 is a number for me of both change and activity. So there could be some financial changes that people are going through, and that could be maybe I'm looking at the image here, and we have the dog who's coming home and the door is open. So it could be that there may be issues around home or real estate or property, so things like mortgages. There may be people who are changing homes, or there may be people who are relocating or moving or things like that, and there may be issues with finances involving that or around that or within that. So I'm seeing that. The 5 of coins for me, generally speaking, can talk about things where we feel like we are on the outside looking in. That would be the dog on the outside of the house, you know, that kind of thing. So there may be an issue where we're feeling like we're the odd man out, or that we are the outcast, or again, like I said before, that we are on the outside looking in. For me, this card can talk about, if we're talking about our spirituality and our spiritual beliefs, which is an interesting thing because Samhain is a time where we are, not everyone as a collective, but some of us are exploring our spirituality, or that is a pivotal time to be exploring our spirituality, because the veil is thinning between this world and the spirit world. So there may be a lot of focus or energy put on that or within that. And as a result of that, or maybe if you're following a belief system that is considered outside of the norm, or outside of the mainstream, or outside of what's considered traditional, that may be another way that you are on the outside looking in. Because I'm looking at the windows with the pentacles in the windows. And so that may be for those of us who are, following a more pagan path or earth-based spirituality, right? So that may be considered outside of the norm, right? So there may be that kind of thing. And along with the idea of being on the outside looking in, sometimes this card can turn up to suggest that your presence is not being as valued by those around you as it could be. So you may want to take a look at that. How are people displaying or demonstrating a lack of value about who you are? And it may have produced in you internally, you questioning your own sense of worth and value, right? So it may be a matter of you taking a look at the people around you, or the environments that you're in, your material, physical environments, to see if you are being valued as who you are, and if not, how is that possibly playing on your own sense of self-worth and self-value, right? And as I'm talking about that out loud, it could also be that this card is turning up to suggest that there may be a change or a shift in your values, right? So some of the things that you used to value in the past, maybe you don't value now at this moment, and vice versa. Some of the things that maybe you put a lot of emphasis on taking a back seat, and some of the things that maybe you didn't think were so important have now been brought to the forefront. So I'm seeing all of that. The last thing I will say, as a person who is self-employed, when I get this card usually talks about challenges with self-employment, and it could just be a matter of things being cyclical or seasonal. And I talked about the idea that we're talking about Samhain and the fall within the context of this reading, but sometimes for me this card can talk about the winter months. So it could be like taking a look at your business and how it runs, and if it runs in particular cycles, like maybe you may be moving into a period that's going to be maybe a little bit of a downturn in terms of income revenue, in terms of client generation, things like that, and you may want to say, what can I do if I know that period is coming up? What can I do to circumvent maybe the lack of income that would normally be generated, right? So for me, just to give an example, for me as a card reader, I always noticed that my business would take a dip between Thanksgiving and Christmas, and sometimes wouldn't pick back up until the beginning of the new year. So that's just to give you an example of what I'm trying to get across here. So it could just be a matter of, if you are self-employed, your business may be falling into maybe a possible lean time, and this card is showing up to kind of maybe get you thinking about how can you circumvent that lean period, right? Okay, so I'm taking a step back to ask if there's anything else I want to say about the card. At this moment I do not, but maybe the other cards surrounding it will give me more to say. So let's start with the card on the far left. So for me, when I work with a line of 5, especially when I'm working with a tarot deck or an oracle deck, this card can talk about, like, I call it the origin card. So this could be letting us know, like, what's opening up, or what is the situation that's creating the need to focus on whatever the 5 of coins means to you. So taking a look at this card, here we have, it's Il Mago. So the majors are in Italian. And so for me, this is the Magician. And so the Magician is all about, and I love this, there are no mistakes the way I language things, I'm languaging this as the period of Samhain and the fall, coming up to the end of the fall equinox, right? So those are pretty more, I would say, pagan, or again, earth-based spirituality type words. So the Magician in that regard could be taking a look at your magical practice, right? So if you are pagan or a witch, or however you language that for yourself, or label that for yourself, this card is a clear sign to be investing the time and energy, especially when I talked about the idea about your path being maybe non-traditional, not in the norm, not the mainstream, 5 of coins. Then this card is saying putting some energy into your practice, right? It could just be a matter of you are working on developing your practice, so maybe you're not clear on what your practice looks like. That's okay. This card is number 1, and the 1 is all about the individual, right? So this is about your personal practice, right? What does that look like for you? What are the tools? He has all the tools that he needs, the Magician on the card, for his practice. So what are the tools that you need for your practice? In truth, if you're a magical practitioner, you really don't need tools, right? So it could just be, if you're starting out and maybe finances are concerned with that, maybe it's just, just accepting that, you are your most important tool in your magical practice, right? But it could also be too, like, you are working on implementing or getting some tools, right? So there's that. Now, if I go with the idea that the Magician is also a card that talks about self-employment, which is the last thing I talked about over here with the 5 of coins, then this card is about what is your specialty? Because for me, the Magician is all about being a specialist and having some form of specialization, right? So getting you to focus on what is your specialty, because I'm going somewhere with this. Because the Magician is all about promotion, right? For those of us who are into astrology, this card is assigned the planet Mercury, and Mercury is all about communication, right? So with that in mind, This is about promotion. What is the messaging that you have around your business? What is the messaging, if you need to change it, that could maybe get you out of that lean time or that cyclical pattern of, feast and famine, where you have a period where your business is productive, and then you have those periods where it's not so much so. How can you maybe take a look at how are you getting your messaging across? And that would be Business 101, marketing, advertising, all those kinds of things. That falls into the realm of the magician when we're talking about business. So this would be a nod for you to take a look at your messaging when it comes to your business. But again, I'm thinking, for me personally, I'm feeling like this is more about one's magical practice. And what do you need to kind of consider? That would be the tools of your particular practice. I'm looking at the magician. For me, this is a card that talks about, since we're talking about Samhain and the veil thinning, this is a card that talks about channeling. So it could just be a matter of maybe as part of your practice, you're working on your channeling ability, and that would be the ability to communicate with spirits. So maybe working more on that, being more open and receptive. I'm looking at the image, and here he has the affinity symbol above his crown. So that could just be a matter of being more in touch with the infinite. So, it may not even be that you are channeling spirits of those who have crossed over from this world to the next world, right? Who have left this side of the veil and moved on to the other side. It could be that you are channeling higher spiritual beings and entities, and that again, that falls in line with the path that you are on. Not everybody is on the same path, and there are deities and spirits that are associated with every path, no matter what it is, right? So it could just be a matter of you paying more attention or being more in contact with those spiritual beings, right? So there is that. I'm taking a look to see what else I wanted to say. Yes. So the other thing I will say, since the magician is a major arcana card and they carry more weight in a reading for me, they talk about important issues or events, and sometimes those of spiritual principles. With that in mind, this card is talking about the spiritual principle of as above, so below. So for me, and this is just how I interpret that. So for me, this is about what are the spiritual principles that you follow, and how can you put them more into practice. The spiritual principles would be the as above, and then the so below part would be how do you apply those principles into your life so that you can see that they work, right? So that is what I want to say about the magician. So it's a very important card, again, because it's a major arcana card. But for me, it's all about, if you're a magical practitioner, what are the tools of your trade? How are you working with the spirits that are in alignment or associated with that particular practice, right? And actually, as I'm talking about this, this card is making me feel like the message I want to get across, it's not about just intellectualizing your practice. It's about actually doing your practice, putting it into practice, right? That's the idea about having a practice. It's about what are you doing to put your practice into practice, right? So again, that's if you're a magic practitioner. If you are self-employed, then this card is about taking a look at what your specialty is, and are you communicating that effectively to those who would be finding your particular service of value, right? And then the last thing I will say, generally speaking, this is a card about if we're feeling like, we're on the outside looking in, or we're feeling like we're being the outcast, or that we're having issues around our basic needs being met, our value system changing or in a state of flux, then this card is about willpower and determination. Okay? So that's what I will say about the magician. So now let's take a look at the card in between the two. And here we have the Two of Blades. So for me, this card is all about indecision, right? And it's a nice follow-up. So here we have maybe, a sense of conflict And usually this card can be either external conflict, meaning I'm having a conflict with another person. That would make sense with the Five of Coins, where I talked about, being on the outside looking in, or not being valued, or, feeling a sense of rejection. All those kinds of things fall into the Five of Coins, so this would be leading up to that. So maybe there's a conflict with another person that results in this, or that it's an internal conflict, because the Suit of Blades for me represents the mind. So it could just be like I'm internally conflicted about something in my life, right? It could be that there's an internal conflict, maybe with some people about their business, maybe if there's a change with that, or that there is a sense of indecision about what they want to do in their business, or a sense of not really being sure about what to do going forward with the business. The woman on the card is blindfolded and she has two swords, so that usually represents two options being considered. And with the blindfold, it's about really working on being as neutral as you can when it comes to evaluating the two options that are being presented. So that's the first thing I will say. Now, if there is a communication issue, maybe that's why you're being quote unquote out in the cold or frozen out, kind of thing. And I'm reminded that this card is Mercury, which is communication, like I said. Then this card would be about, whatever the issue is, it may be a matter of just getting to a place where you are being willing to agree to disagree rather than butting heads, because this card for me can represent butting heads, but it's usually around an issue that's not really changing all that much. And so maybe the way to resolve it would just be to agree to disagree, if that is possible. So that's what I'm seeing with this. I'm also seeing maybe possibly, if I go back to one of the things I said with this card that I didn't come back to, if there is something having to do with real estate, property, somebody who's maybe changing house, then the Two of Blades, when it comes up for me, can represent a contract. So there may be something about a letter or a phone call within a period of time, usually for me when it comes after a major arcana card or before it. This card would suggest 4 weeks as a period of time, right? So maybe over the course of the next month. And I love how he languaged this, because we have just about that much time as I'm filming this with Samhain and the end of the fall equinox. So maybe within that time frame, there may be something involving a letter, written communication, phone call, verbal communication, or a contract, right? And usually if there's a contract involved, then this card would be offering that you read the contract carefully. And I'm saying this with my disclaimer that I'm not a lawyer, but you read the contract carefully, that you understand the details before your name goes on the dotted line, before you sign on the dotted line, right? So that's what I would say here. And there may be something having to do with communication that needs to be cleared up. And especially because you don't want to be on the losing end of that situation, which would be the Five of Coins, because the Five of Coins can sometimes talks about, again, like I said, financial worry or concern, sometimes financial loss. The only other thing I will say is with the Five of Coins that I didn't touch on, and this would fit with the magician being a specialist, is that, of course, we're still moving through the experience that we're all collectively having regarding the pandemic, things around vaccines, vaccinations, things like that. And sometimes, and I'm mentioning that because the Five of Coins can talk about illness or minor colds, things like that. And so, of course, we're changing seasons soon, because I talked about this coming to the end of the fall equinox, and then we're going to be moving into the winter solstice. And so that, of course, is a time where everyone, regardless, would do well to kind of maybe pay more attention to their physical well-being, right? So that's what I want to say. And so this card could represent, paying attention to your specialist, if you have a specialist that you refer to for your wellness routine, your wellness program, or that there may be something that comes up in terms of a conflict regarding a particular specialist out in the world and what he or she is having to say in terms of communication or messaging around a particular issue. So I think that's as much as I want to touch on that particular aspect, so I'm going to go ahead and move on. So now we're taking a look at the cards on the other side of the line, starting with the card next to the Five of Coins, and here we have the Four of Cups. Okay, so now the Four of Cups for me is a card that can talk about being in a place where we are discontent or dissatisfied with life as it is. That would make sense. I'm going with the order of the cards. Here we have conflict, whether external or internal. Then we have this period of evaluation, maybe a change in values, maybe feeling a sense like we've been frozen out or, ignored or devalued, right? And then we move to, from there, we move to feelings of discontent and dissatisfaction, and it could be with the situation that's being presented here, right? And as a result of that, it gets us to kind of examine or reevaluate life. The 4 for me is a number of formation. So as a result of this, if this is following this card, we may be forming or restructuring your life. Again, the 4 is about structure, order, discipline, right? So it's all about maybe restructuring your life, but your emotions are playing a huge part in that, right? It could also be too like there is a need to maybe create some structure around your spiritual practice. I'm being reminded what I said about the Magician card. So there may be a sense of here that you are restructuring or that you are forming what your spiritual practice is, or that you need to be more disciplined regarding your spiritual practice. And I'm saying that because the 3 cups here in the image can sometimes represent, things in life that we allow to preoccupy us or distract us, to keep us from something. And I can't help but notice that the cup in the sky is being offered to the person on the card, but does she see it, right? It could be, something that's being overlooked. For me, that's a nod that Spirit wants to offer its assistance to us regarding our spiritual practice, but we may be letting the things in life, 5 of Coins, kind of preoccupy us and distract us to keep us from seeing what it is that Spirit has to offer, right? For me, this card is also about angels, so maybe, because I talked about channeling spiritual beings, so maybe if you are an angel practitioner or you fancy angels, this card would be suggesting the message to you is that your angels are there to help and assist you. It's a matter of you calling on them. Angels have to be invoked, which means that we have to just call on them. That's what an invocation is, right? So it could just be a matter of you realizing that your angels are waiting in the wings, and that pun was intended, for you to call on them and so they can assist you, right? Because they have to honor your free will. And if you don't call on them, they will just be waiting until you do so. So, so the 4 of Cups, again, is a card that talks about being discontent, dissatisfied with life. I call it the divine discontent. So that could be leading to a change in your spiritual practice, a change in your beliefs, things like that. But it could also be just realizing that help is on the way. And that would make sense too, because one of the other aspects of the 5 of Coins, which I have not mentioned up to this point in time, is that this card can be about basic needs being met and help being offered, or help being given, or there's a need for assistance. And then this card following that would make sense that it is being offered. It may not be in the form that maybe you are anticipating, expecting, looking for, but it will show up. Okay. So that is the 4 of Cups. And then the last card, rounding out this reading, is the Ace of Blades. So I love this. Okay, so the first thing I will say, for me, aces in tarot represent seasons. This one for me is the season of, wait for it, fall. So here we have the time periods when this card comes up for me. It represents September, October, November. I'm filming this on October the 27th, so it still falls within that. So again, I love it. It just, for me, is validation and confirmation of the intention of the time frame that I put within this reading. So for me, that is a great thing. Now, when the Ace of Blades comes up, and especially I love seeing it in the outcome position, this represents getting the answer or solution to a problem we've been experiencing. Yeah, I love this. This is about a triumph, a victory, some form of success. Now, it's in the realm of the mind. So this could be an idea. You know, could be a change in the way we think. Remember, I talked about this card about change, right? So this could be in the change that we think. You know, a change in our mindset, things like that. If you are the person who I talked about being a channel, I'm just using that as a reference because this card bookends or mirrors the magician, right? And I talked about this card being about channeling. This card in this regard would be about receiving an epiphany, a realization, an aha, and it comes through your crown chakra, right? And I talked about the crown with this card, right? So we have it being referenced again here, right? So there is that. So it may be like you receive this idea, this big idea, right? And it has the potential to create great change in your life because for me the suit of blades represents lifestyle and then aces represent potential. So whatever this could be that's coming your way could have a profound effect on your lifestyle and it could change it. It could start the ball rolling to create a great change in your lifestyle. Now here's the thing. The rub with this card is that it can also be about a bumpy or rocky start to that change, right? So what I want to offer to you, like if you are moving into changing something in your life and you think that because it appears to be a bit of a bumpy start, do not be deterred by that, right? It's just a matter of getting over the hump or the bumps in the road. But this card offers that you could do it and do it successfully, right? You just have to hang in there. Now, of course, blades could be about information as well. So it could just be, you know, taking some information and moving forward with it. So I'm asking what else do I want to say about the Ace of Blades before I wrap this up? Yes, there is one other thing. So for those people that I talked about maybe that are self-employed or maybe even thinking about moving into doing something, this card is about writing. So first off, it's about a job and career change before I get to the writing part specifically. This card can be about a job or career change. So the magician here on the other end is about job and employment. We had a card here that talked about maybe challenges with job and employment. So there may be somebody who is also, I talked about changing house or moving house, but there may be somebody or some people who are also thinking about changing jobs, you know, a shift in that. It could be like maybe you're shifting from working for someone else, punching somebody else's clock, and you're moving more into doing your own thing. Or maybe if you're having challenges with your self-employment venture, you have to consider the idea or the possibility that you may have to supplement that with a job out in the world, right? So it could be one or the other, or for some people, a little bit of both, right? So there's that, and that may be where the two options are coming in with the Two of Blades, right? So there's a job or career change. I also see this card about writing. So there, because I go with the idea that the pen is mightier than the sword, right? That's the expression that always comes to my mind with this. So there may be something about writing. So now I'm remembering that I talked about a contract. So there we have something again about something being communicated through writing specifically. Or it could be that there is someone or some people in the collective right now who are thinking about writing something. And it could be like writing maybe your life story. What's coming to me in the moment is about writing a life story, especially if you've had some sort of challenge that maybe you worked through, or that you had a change, a big change in your spiritual path or your spiritual beliefs or your spiritual belief systems, like you moved from one to another, and you feel like the things that maybe you have learned, especially if you got downloads from spirit directly, you feel like other people would benefit from, you might want to put those down in writing. So on that note, I will go ahead and wrap up this Oracle Outlook reading for the period of Samhain. So starting with Samhain and moving to the end of the fall equinox. And so if you stay with me until the end of this video, thank you so much for spending this time with me as we walked through the cards together. Thank you for sharing the space with me for this session, and I look forward to sharing the same space with you again in a reading or a video in the future. So until then, I'm wishing you all the best and take care.